I knew the day was going to implode the moment the server room sang the wrong note. After 21 years in infrastructure, you don't just hear machines, you feel them. The fans, the drives, the power supplies all hum together like a tired orchestra. That morning, the tone was off. A low, uneasy B-flat where there should have been a steady C. The sound of something about to break. I was elbow deep in a rack, fiber cable between my teeth, wrists scratched raw by metal rails, when the door slammed open hard enough to rattle the cage. It wasn't the polite knock of an employee who forgot their password. It was entitlement in leather soles. Expensive Italian loafers stepped into my domain, followed by the unmistakable confidence of a man who had never fixed anything himself. Ethan Cole, the owner's son, 32 years old, crypto buzzwords for a personality, and a LinkedIn bio that said visionary without a hint of irony. His hairline was retreating faster than accountability ever would. Clinging to his arm like an accessory was the reason he was there. Let's call her Luna. Beige linen outfit, oversized sunglasses indoors, iced oat milk latte held like a sacred artifact. Influencer posture. Permanent phone grip. She looked around the server room as if she'd wandered into a cave full of hostile spirits. "We need to talk," Ethan said, already irritated that the room hadn't rearranged itself to suit him. I slid out from the rack slowly. No rush. Panic is for people without backups. I checked my watch. 10:12 a.m. Too early for nonsense, too late to avoid it. "Morning, Ethan," I said. "Unless the building's on fire or your dad finally approved upgrading off Windows Server 2012, I'm busy." He waved a dismissive hand. "This isn't technical. This is about culture, alignment, energy." He gestured around my office, the windowless room that kept the company alive. Blinking LEDs, half-empty pretzel bags, monitors stacked like a control tower. Ugly, functional, indispensable. "Luna is joining us," he said. "She's our new brand atmosphere lead." I blinked once. That a job title, or did HR give up halfway through typing? Luna smiled like a sparkle grenade went off. "This room has amazing grounding energy," she said. "No windows. Very womb-like. But all the buzzing electronics are killing the vibe. They really need to go." She pointed at the primary server stack. "Payroll, logistics, client database, everything?" I laughed. "Short, dry. Those boxes are the reason your boyfriend can afford those shoes. Unplug them and this company stops existing in 4 seconds. Ethan puffed up. "That attitude is exactly the problem. You're outdated. You block innovation. We're pivoting." "I built your cloud," I said. "I configured your VPN while you were failing freshman calculus." "That's why this is easy," he replied, smirking. "You're terminated, effective immediately." Luna nodded approvingly. "I need the space by noon for a manifestation session." The room went quiet. Not shocked quiet, heavy quiet. The kind that smells like burning bridges. I looked at Ethan and saw a man who had never rebooted a router at 3 a.m. A boy holding a loaded weapon, convinced it was a toy. "Just to be clear," I said calmly, "I'm fired?" "Restructuring," he corrected. "We're outsourcing it." "Great," I said. That was it. No shouting, no tears. I grabbed my bag, swept my desk clean. A framed photo of my cat, a stress ball shaped like a grenade, nicotine gum, armor of invisibility on, gray cardigan buttoned. "I installed the badge readers," I said, walking past them. "I know the way out." At the door, I paused. "One tip, don't touch the blue cable. Or the red one. Actually, don't touch anything." I left at 10:18 a.m., and Ethan Cole thought he'd won. He had no idea the countdown had already started. The hallway lights buzzed overhead as I walked out, that sterile corporate hum following me like an accusation. People looked up from their desks. Jenna from accounting. Counting froze mid-keystroke. Mark from logistics stared a second too long. They saw the bag on my shoulder. They saw the set of my jaw. No one asked questions. In offices like this, silence is a language everyone understands. The elevator doors slid shut. Numbers ticked down. 4, 3, 2, 1. Lobby. Freedom, technically. I stepped outside into the damp fall air and crossed the parking lot toward my car. A 12-year-old Subaru with a faded "My Other Car" is a server rack sticker peeling off the bumper. I tossed my bag into the passenger seat and didn't start the engine. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the stopwatch. Zeros stared back at me. I tapped start. Most people think it is about resetting passwords and fixing printers for executives who can't remember their own birthdays. They don't see the invisible lattice underneath a company, the permissions stacked on permissions, the quiet logic that keeps order from collapsing into chaos. Ethan Cole certainly didn't see it. He saw blinking lights he could repaint sage green for Luna's Instagram stories. He didn't know about 6 months earlier. The ransomware incident. It had hit on a Tuesday at 2:17 a.m., classic timing. Eastern Europe, probably, though attribution barely matters when your entire client database is being held hostage. They got in because the previous admin, Ethan's golfing buddy, had left the root password as welcome123. By the time I was called, the owner, Richard Cole, was sweating through a $3,000 suit, pacing my office like a trapped animal. "Lock it down," he'd begged. "I don't care how. Just make it impossible." So I rebuilt everything. Authentication, network segmentation, access hierarchy. I didn't use off-the-shelf solutions. I wrote my own system. Aggressive, paranoid, trust no one. I named it Argus, after the 100-eyed giant that never slept. And because experience teaches you one thing above all else, I protected myself. I had a clause inserted into my contract. Buried, dry, legal. A clause Ethan had never read. The stopwatch ticked past 3 minutes. Inside the building, Ethan was probably dragging furniture, unplugging cables, trying to impress Luna. He would ignore my warning. Men like him always do. And Argus didn't care about vibes. Argus checked for a heartbeat every 12 minutes. Not a network ping, a cryptographic token tied to the active session of the senior systems administrator. Me. If that token vanished without a proper handover sequence, a process that took hours and physical keys, the system assumed a hostile takeover. It didn't ask questions. It locked everything. At 7 minutes, I leaned back and lit a cigarette, a bad habit resurrected for special occasions. The office windows reflected the gray sky. 3rd floor. Movement behind the blinds. Ethan, probably celebrating. At 12 minutes exactly, my phone vibrated once. Not a call, a status alert. Argus, heartbeat lost, threat level elevated. HR had done their job efficiently. My employment status flipped to terminated in payroll. Payroll was integrated into security. When that flag changed, Argus woke up fully. At 14 minutes, I imagined the screens inside turning red, the giant eye appearing, the first panicked shouts. At 16 minutes, the uninterruptible power supplies would kick in, isolating hardware from the grid. At 18, door maglocks in the warehouse would fail safe to locked. I didn't feel joy. I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes from watching a system behave exactly as designed. At 19 minutes, my phone rang. Ethan. I let it ring. Twice. 3 times. I answered and put it on speaker, setting it on the dashboard. "What did you do?" he screamed. "I waited. The screens are red," he shouted. "It's asking for an eye scan. Why is it asking for an eye?" "A biometric verification," I said mildly. "High security protocol. Fix it." "I can't," I replied. "You fired me." Silence. Then fear crept into his voice. The warehouse doors won't open. Yes, I said. They locked during a breach. You locked people in. No, I corrected. You removed the pilot mid-flight. In the background, I heard Luna crying about the Wi-Fi. Ethan swallowed. I'll rehire you. Too late, I said, watching the stopwatch pass 22 minutes. Argus is awake now, and Argus never negotiated. Listen, Ethan said, his voice dropping from rage to something thinner, something closer to panic. Just come back upstairs, scan your eye, we'll talk after. I exhaled smoke through the cracked window and watched it curl into the damp air. I'm no longer an employee, I said. If I step near those servers, that's unauthorized access. Corporate espionage. Orange jumpsuits don't flatter me. You built this thing, he snapped. You can undo it. I didn't build it to be undone, I replied. I built it to survive incompetence. Behind him, I could hear chaos forming, phones ringing unanswered, someone shouting about printers. The distinct, rising whine of cooling fans ramping up as the system isolated itself. Argus was sealing doors, severing network segments, freezing databases mid-transaction. Not out of spite. Out of protocol. Why is there a timer? Ethan asked suddenly, his voice cracking. I checked my watch. What happens when it hits 0? That's the purge window, I said casually. If biometric verification isn't completed within 60 minutes of lockdown, Argus assumes physical theft. It wipes local encryption keys. Wipes? He whispered. Shreds, I corrected. 7-pass overwrite. Your data becomes decorative noise. You're bluffing. Maybe, I said. How paranoid do you think your father is? Silence. I imagined him looking around the room, seeing Luna crouched on a yoga mat, clutching her phone like a talisman, realizing that manifestation didn't come with admin privileges. How do I stop it? He asked. You can't, I said. Not without my retina. A beat. Then come back. No, I'll pay you. I smiled. Now you're learning. Before he could answer, the call dropped. Not my doing. Argus had begun deprioritizing non-essential communications. Cellular signal inside the building was degrading as network-linked repeaters shut down. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unfamiliar number. Kevin, Geek Squad Pro. Hi, I'm on site. Server's asking for Retina scan? I laughed out loud. He'd called Geek Squad. He thought enterprise security was a retail problem. I called Kevin immediately. Kevin, I said, do not touch anything. Ma'am, you're standing in front of Dell PowerEdge servers running a custom kernel with SE Linux enforcing mode. If you trigger 3 failed authentication attempts, the fire suppression system may deploy. Deploy what? Halon, I said. It removes oxygen. A pause. I like breathing. Then leave, I said. Charge the service call. Walk away. Okay, he said quickly. Click. My phone lit up with another call. This one wasn't Ethan. It was Jenna from accounting. I let it go to voicemail, then Mark from logistics. Voicemail, then the main office line. The scope was dawning on them now. Payroll frozen, inventory locked, trucks idling at the gates, systems talking to systems that could no longer answer back. I reached into my glove compartment and unfolded a creased piece of paper. The contract, signed by Richard Cole himself. Clause 7.2, Identity Persistence. Root access bound biometrically to the Senior Systems Administrator. Clause 8.1. Termination without a 30-day handover triggers hostile vacancy protocols. Clause 12. Unofficially, the idiot son clause. Any attempt to bypass triggers full lockdown. I checked the stopwatch. 38 minutes remaining. Ethan called again. This time I answered immediately. "I'll do anything," he said. "Just tell me what to type." "There is no password," I replied. "This isn't a movie. You're destroying the company." "No," I said. "I'm protecting it. From you." A muffled voice shouted in the background. "Someone mentioned the warehouse. Someone else said the police were there." "Union reps." "Fines. I can't authorize what you want," Ethan whispered. "My spending limit?" "There it is," I said softly. "You're not the boss." He didn't respond. "Call your father," I continued, "because the clock doesn't care about your title." I ended the call and started the engine. I wasn't done. I just wasn't going back the way he expected. I drove across the street and parked at a strip mall, watching the building from a distance. The third-floor windows flickered. Red. Then darker red. Argus had entered full fortress mode, and somewhere inside, Ethan Cole was finally realizing that systems remember everything, even when people don't. I didn't drive far. I crossed the street and pulled into the gravel lot of a tired strip mall, parking between a dollar store and a closed nail salon with a flickering neon sign. From there, I had a clear view of the building. Third floor. Red emergency lights pulsing faintly behind the glass. The company looked alive, but only in the way a body twitches after the brainstem is severed. My phone started vibrating again. Not Ethan this time. Jenna. Mark. The general office number. I let them all go. This wasn't about them, and answering would only spread panic. I needed one specific call, and I knew who would make it. While I waited, I unfolded the contract again, smoothing it against the steering wheel. Richard Cole had built the company from a rented garage into a regional logistics supplier. He understood grit. He also understood fear. When the ransomware hit, he hadn't asked me to fix it cheaply. He'd asked me to make sure it never happened again. That was the difference between him and his son. Richard respected systems. Ethan treated them like furniture. At 41 minutes remaining, my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered. Is this Sarah?" a nervous male voice asked. "Who's asking?" This is Tom, from the legal team. Mr. Cole wants to know what's happening." I smiled. "Which Mr. Cole?" A pause. "Richard Cole." "There we go," I said. "Put him on." A few seconds of shuffling, then a familiar, gravelly voice came through, low and controlled. "Sarah. Why am I getting 20 missed calls and a message saying payroll is frozen?" "Because Ethan fired me," I said, at 10:15, without initiating the offboarding protocol. Silence. Then, quietly, "He did what?" "The system interpreted it as a hostile removal of the primary administrator," I continued. "Argus locked everything: warehouse, billing, access control." Another pause, longer this time. I imagined him sitting somewhere expensive, phone in hand, the weight of consequences settling in. "And the eye scan?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Biometric lock. You approved it." A sharp exhale. "How long?" I checked the stopwatch. 29 minutes until local key purge. "Jesus," he muttered. "Is Ethan with you?" "No," I said. "He's upstairs, learning." "I'll be there in 15, Richard said. "Don't touch anything until I arrive." "I wouldn't dream of it," I replied. I hung up and started the car again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I drove toward the golf course at the edge of town, the one Richard played every Friday. Old money, manicured greens, a place where deals were made quietly, without lawyers, over whiskey instead of conference tables. I parked near the clubhouse and went inside. The bar smelled like wood polish and entitlement. I took a seat with a clear view of the 18th hole. My phone buzzed nonstop now. Voicemails stacked up. I ignored them. At 12 minutes remaining, Richard walked in. Sunburned. Tired. Plaid pants that should have been illegal. He spotted me immediately. "What did that idiot do?" he asked, sitting heavily beside me. "He tried to delete the sysadmin," I said. "The system fought back." Richard ordered a double bourbon without looking at the menu. He drank half of it in one swallow. "Can you fix it?" "Yes," I said, "but not as an employee." He looked at me sharply. "What do you want?" "I want to be a contractor," I said. "Non-revocable retainer. Triple my previous hourly rate. And I report directly to you." "And Ethan?" "He submits tickets," I said, "and stays out of my sight." Richard closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "Done." I pulled a pen from my bag and slid a napkin toward him. I wrote fast. "Consulting agreement. Rate. Autonomy." He signed without reading. "How much time?" he asked. I checked my phone. 7 minutes. We stood and walked out together. When we pulled into the company lot, the gate was locked. Trucks lined the road, drivers shouting. I leaned out of my window. "Admin override," I said clearly. "Voice authentication." A pause. Then, "Identity confirmed." The gates slid open. Richard stared at me. "You really did think of everything." "No," I said. "I just assumed someday someone like Ethan would exist." Inside the building, chaos waited, but the countdown was almost over. And this time, I was walking back in on my terms. Walking back into the building felt different this time. When I left, I was invisible. The gray cardigan woman people only noticed when something broke. Now, every head turned. The emergency lights cast everything in a dull red haze, like the inside of a warning signal. Groups of employees stood frozen, unsure whether to whisper or pray. When they saw Richard Cole beside me, the tension shifted. When they saw me, it vanished into relief. We took the stairs. The elevators were locked down. Each step echoed with the sound of a company holding its breath. On the 3rd floor, the executive suite looked like a crime scene. Furniture half moved, cables dangling. The door to my old office stood open. Ethan was pacing, sweat darkening his shirt, his confidence gone. Luna sat on a yoga ball she must have bought during the crisis, mascara streaking down her face. When Ethan saw his father, he froze. When he saw me, he flinched. "Move," Richard said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Ethan scrambled aside. I walked into my office. Someone had draped a mandala tapestry over the server rack, a fire hazard masquerading as decor. I ripped it off and tossed it into the corner. "Don't touch that," Luna whimpered. "It's covering the intake fans of a $20,000 blade server," I said. "Get out." Richard didn't look at her. "Both of you. Now." They backed into the hallway like children being expelled from class. The glass walls turned them into spectators. I sat down in my chair. The main monitor glowed red. A massive eye stared back at me. "Lockdown active. Time to purge. 000841. Richard's voice tightened. "Can you stop it?" "Yes," I said. "But first I need confirmation. Ethan doesn't have the new Wi-Fi password." Richard exhaled sharply. "For God's sake, no." "Good," I said. "Security hygiene." I leaned forward. "Initiate biometric restore." The system responded instantly. "Scanning." I placed my chin on the rest. A green beam traced my left eye, then my right. The machine paused. Identity confirmed. Sarah Miller. Status terminated. Error. Richard swore under his breath. Relax, I said. HR marked me inactive. I need to override it. I typed fast. Commands stacked. Warnings flashed. Action will be logged and reported to the board. Let it report, I muttered. The prompt changed. Enter reauthorization key. This was the part Ethan never would have guessed. It wasn't a password. It was a phrase. One I'd hard-coded 6 months earlier, half as a joke, half as a reminder. I typed, "The best culture is uptime." I hit enter. The red emergency lights faded to blue. The fans roared, spinning up to cool, overheated cores. The countdown froze at 00:06:32, then disappeared entirely. System restored. Lockdown lifted. Welcome back, Administrator. Richard sagged slightly, like a man who'd been holding his breath underwater. It's done? The core's up, I said. But the network's a mess. Cables were pulled, routing tables corrupted. I glanced through the glass. Ethan stood rigid, eyes wide, face pale. Tell him to go home, I said, and tell him not to touch anything ever again. Richard nodded and stepped into the hallway. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the effect. Ethan's shoulders slumped. Luna burst into fresh tears. They walked toward the elevators without looking back. I turned to the screens. This was my real work. Rebuilding maps, reasserting permissions, restoring order. As I typed, I added another layer of protection. Because if today taught me anything, it was that the biggest threat to a system wasn't foreign hackers. It was entitlement with authority. By early afternoon, the office began moving again. Phones rang, emails sent, trucks rolled through the gates. The nervous system restarted. Richard returned with a coffee from somewhere better than the break room and set it on my desk. Peace offering, he said. Accepted, I replied. He hesitated. The board's asking questions. Tell them it was a stress test, I said. We found a single think of failure and fixed it. He snorted. Human error in the executive chain. Exactly. He leaned forward. This can't rely on one person forever. I stopped typing. Then promote me. CIO. Board level. Only the board can fire me. Richard studied the humming rack, then nodded slowly. I'll make the call. I smiled faintly. Good. Because next time, I might let the timer run out. And for the first time all day, the servers hummed perfectly in tune. By 2:30 in the afternoon, the building had settled into a fragile imitation of normal. Phones rang with forced cheer. Emails flew faster than usual, everyone trying to prove productivity after 4 hours of digital paralysis. No one mentioned what had happened out loud, but it lived in every glance, every hushed conversation near the printers. They had all seen how close the edge was. I kept my office door open on purpose. Visibility matters after an incident. People needed to see the system guardian back at her post, hands steady, screens green. The server rack purred beside me, back to its proper pitch. Clean, stable, obedient. Richard returned around 3 with a legal pad tucked under his arm and the posture of a man who had aged a year since lunch. He sat across from me, rubbing his temples. The board wants a briefing, he said. They saw the public status page. Good, I replied without looking up. Fear is educational, he sighed. They're asking how a single termination could cripple the company. I leaned back. Because the company's nervous system was designed to prevent theft, not ego. Argus did exactly what it was built to do. They're worried about concentration of power, Richard said carefully. They should be worried about concentration of incompetence, I countered. Power doesn't break systems. Carelessness does. He didn't argue. That told me everything. An hour later, HR quietly updated my status. Consultant, active, elevated clearance. The system acknowledged the change instantly. Argus relaxed, shifting from fortress posture to sentinel mode. The difference was subtle, but I felt it, like unclenching a fist. At 4:15, I ran one last script. Not destructive, educational. I pulled up Ethan's user account. He'd tried to log into his email 3 times from the parking lot earlier, probably hoping to salvage contacts. The system had flagged the attempt automatically. I didn't delete his account. That would have been petty. Instead, I updated the security policy. Password expiration, 24 hours. Minimum length, 30 characters. Uppercase, lowercase, number, symbol, and 1 non-Latin character. No reuse. No hints. I saved the changes and closed the console. At 4:30, my phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. Thank you. I didn't reply. Gratitude doesn't need acknowledgement to be real. By 5, the office lights shifted to evening mode. I packed my bag slowly, deliberately. No rush. Control is choosing when to leave. As I walked out, the security gates opened without protest. The parking lot was dark now, illuminated by steady white lights. Calm. Order restored. As I drove toward the exit, I saw Ethan's red convertible parked on the shoulder. He sat inside, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the building like it had betrayed him. Luna was gone. Influence has limits. I slowed just enough to roll down my window. He looked up, eyes red, face hollow. You ruined my life, he said hoarsely. I took a breath, then exhaled smoke into the cold air. I didn't do anything, Ethan. I let you press the buttons. I'll tell my dad you rigged it, he muttered. He knows, I said, and he knows why it worked. His tablet lit up in his lap. White screen, resetting. He stared at it in horror. Standard protocol, I added. Compromise device. He didn't answer. He couldn't. I drove on. I didn't go straight home. I stopped at a liquor store and bought a bottle of single malt expensive enough to hurt. Then the grocery store for spicy pickles. Balance matters. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in my chair, Kat immediately claiming my lap, and poured a drink. The day replayed itself in my head, not with anger, but with clarity. I hadn't won by shouting. I hadn't threatened. I'd built a system that told the truth faster than people could lie. I checked my phone once more. A message from my mother. Saw on Facebook you got fired. Maybe this is God's way of telling you to settle down. I smiled and typed back. Actually got promoted. Buying a new car tomorrow. I set the phone down. The system was green. The building was quiet. The threat was neutralized. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a villain. I was just the person who made sure the lights stayed on. And tomorrow, the board would learn exactly how expensive stability really was. I slept deeper that night than I had in months. No dreams, no alerts, no phantom vibrations from a phone that usually lived under my pillow like a loaded weapon. When I woke, the first thing I did was check the system dashboard from my personal laptop, air-gapped and clean. All green. Latency normal. No unauthorized access attempts. Argus was content. Monday morning came quietly. No dramatic entrances. No emergency sirens. I arrived at the office at 8 sharp, coffee in hand, cardigan replaced with a structured jacket that felt less like camouflage and more like intent. The badge reader recognized me instantly. Administrator. Authorized. It always had, even when people hadn't. The board meeting started at 9. I wasn't invited at first. That changed at 9:06. Richard stepped out of the conference room and gestured me in. 12 people sat around the table, faces tight, tablets open, eyes wary. They'd seen the outage. They'd seen the numbers. Fear sharpens attention. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table and spoke plainly. I explained what Argus was, why it existed, and what had happened when process was ignored. I didn't name Ethan. I didn't need to. Systems don't care about names. They care about conditions. Last Friday wasn't a failure, I said. It was a test you didn't know you were running. The system passed. Management didn't. Silence followed. Then questions. Good ones. Hard ones. About redundancy. About succession. About what would happen if I disappeared. I answered them all. Argus isn't about me, I said. It's about respect. For process. For handover. For the reality that infrastructure doesn't bend to ego. At 10:22, the board voted. Acting CIO. Effective immediately. Formal title pending legal review. I nodded once. Acceptance doesn't require ceremony. Ethan wasn't there. He wouldn't be for a while. Richard had reassigned him to warehouse operations, a role with no passwords and very clear consequences. 6 months minimum. It was kinder than he deserved, harsher than he expected. By noon, the company was humming again. The right note. See, steady and confident. I walked the floor once, not to intimidate, but to be seen. People smiled. Some nodded. A few looked at me like I'd personally wrestled a monster back into its cage. I hadn't. I just closed the gate properly. In the afternoon, I ran one final update. I modified Argus's escalation protocol. Still ruthless, still uncompromising. But now, with a documented succession path that required board-level approval instead of blind trust. Not because I'd gone soft. Because systems evolve, or they die. At 4:55, I shut down my workstation and stood. No one questioned it. Boundaries had been reestablished. I left at 5 on the dot. Outside, the sun was already low. The parking lot lights flickered on. My car waited. Unremarkable. Loyal. As I drove past the exit, I glanced once at the building. Quiet. Alive. Secure. I didn't feel triumph. I felt completion. At home, I poured another drink and queued up a stupid video on YouTube, something involving a man arguing with a raccoon. Balance matters. My cat purred. The world was small again, manageable. I thought about Ethan, about Luna, about all the people who confuse control with competence. They'll always exist. Every company has one. The trick isn't stopping them. It's designing systems that survive them. I checked my phone one last time. A calendar invite from Richard. Board briefing. Long-term infrastructure strategy. I accepted without comment. Before bed, I ran a quick mental checklist. Backups verified. Permissions audited. Alerts tuned. Everything where it belonged. The servers would hum through the night, unseen, unappreciated, indispensable. That was fine, because eventually someone would forget a password, or fire the wrong person, or decide vibes mattered more than uptime. And when that happened, the system would remember. It always does.